Welcome to Kara's Cures, everyone, where we explore the leading edge of wellness. I'm Kara Sundlin. With constant exposure to screens and social media, it can really affect our kids' mental health, and it also opens them up to cyberbullying. So how can parents really help their children handle the social pressure of today in a healthy way? Child psychologist Laura Saunders from the Institute of Living in Hartford is here with us now, and we appreciate you being with us, Dr. Saunders.
Hi, Kara. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we just want to talk about this as an issue with kids. You know, they're on screens all the time. And I think as parents, we're always saying, put it down, put it down, put it down. But how much of the world they're living in right now is that opening them up to some really some risks for mental health problems like cyberbullying?
So, right, I was one of those people that during COVID was saying, just, let them go, let them go. We can't monitor everything. We're in a global pandemic, and screen time, I think, got out of control for a lot of young people, for some adults as well. But now we need to kind of dial things back. And so this idea, to talk about this topic started from a talk that I went to a few weeks ago at my daughter's school by John Halligan. And he talked about cyberbullying, and in his example, cyberbullying was a significant contributing factor to the suicide of his 13-year-old son. And it was really very powerful testimonial. And he's got an awesome website. It's called ryanpatrickhalligan.org, where he has lots of resources for parents. And I think, what we're trying to do is always give parents access to resources. What can we do to help around, monitoring iPhones and monitoring social media and monitoring things that help parents stay on top? So it's not easy. It's really, really not easy for parents these days, because very often kids do end rounds to get access to things, even when they don't want access to things. So the more we can give parents resources, the better for them.
Yeah, and I know you like to define things. Bullying, you say, is defined as an unwanted aggressive behavior, but it can show up in different places.
Right. It's unwanted. It's aggressive. There's a power differential, taller to smaller, older to younger, more socially adept to less socially adept. And it is repeated and chronic. So it's really looking at that separate from just conflict, because conflict happens. Kids get into conflicts. They need to learn how to resolve conflicts. They need to learn how to solve problems. But with cyberbullying, you can't get away from it, right? It's one thing to have something happen during your school day. It's another thing to have something happen, when you're home and you get a direct message from someone, and it's some aspect of bullying. So it's more pervasive, and that's why it's more concerning. It's also a little harder for parents to kind of put their finger on when they see their child's deterioration. So that's why we like to talk about resources.
Yeah, and you mentioned this website. Why don't you shout it out for everyone of where to go? And what is it that you like about these resources for people? If you can maybe tell some of the resources we should be using.
So it's Ryan, R-Y-A-N, Ryan Patrick Halligan, HALLIGAN.org. And really it has parenting suggestions regarding technology and cyberbullying. It's got a smartphone contract example. It's got age by age guide for kids on smartphones. It's got parental controls. It's got for iPhone and Samsung. So it's got a lot of really great resources, right? And Kara's Cures is about health and wellness, and let's get these parents and families resources. And it's things that you can do, practical things that you can do to stay on top of things, because it's so much easier to deal with a problem, whether it's bullying or any other problem, when it's small or when it's just started than when it's really been ongoing for a while and causing some amount of trauma and distress.
I think the lines get blurry because you hope your kids might say something, but I know that you will say sometimes they might not. They're afraid to bring it forward. So let's talk about that first. When the kids say, don't tell anyone, or no, I'm not being bullied, and you really fear that they might be, what do you do then?
So when you have a strong suspicion something really negative is going on with your child, it could be bullying, and your child now brings it to you, right? Which is what you hope that they do. Unfortunately, what happens is what's a parent's first instinct? To go to the school and say, look, this is what's happening, or go to the sports team or go to the coach, wherever it's happening. And kids have an incredible fear in those situations. No, don't do that. It'll only get worse. And that's not unlike the fear of someone in a domestic violence situation, right? They don't want to bring it to the police. They don't want to bring it to authorities because they fear it'll get worse. They feel like they can manage it, when clearly it's become unmanageable at that point. So, but it will not get better without some intervention and strategies. And schools have gotten so much better about, not just throwing consequences at these individuals. And there's a whole discussion I could get into about how very often bullies have been victims themselves. We call them the bully victim. And so now they're perpetuating this behavior. So they might need some help and support too, but to really look at intervention in terms of not just throwing consequences, but how can we learn to communicate better? How can we solve these problems? How can we address some of the core issues? One of the protective factors I frequently talk about in my work with young people is having a friend. Encouraging kids, helping them socially, to just have one friend. Having just one friend can be a protective factor because that gives them an ally. One of the other issues around bullying is bystanders, and bystanders are those individuals who know that this is going on and they don't do anything. So we're trying to focus more on protective factors and intervention.
Well, and in a high school setting, you said it can be more physical in middle school, but like in a high school setting, I wonder if there's a challenge for parents there because I know you're the mom of a teenager, so maybe you'll share what you do, but a lot of times the kids will say, oh, you're invading my privacy. You can't look at all my private stories. You can't this. Like, you have to start stepping back, which you want to do when it's a high school student, but then you're noticing it could be just exclusion or mean things being put on social media, and you might not see that. And then when they're older, what do you do? Because it's hard to, I've had that situation where sometimes you reach out to another parent and they're not on the same page with you and they don't think their kid's doing anything wrong.
Right. Yeah. So I totally agree. It gets very, very tricky as our kids get older. We want to extend some trust, but trust is always built on communication and accountability. Trust is not an all or nothing. Here, I trust you with, the keys to the bank accounts and cars, and you can do whatever you want, right? It doesn't work like that. Trust is extended a little bit at a time. And when your child is in distress, when that crosses the line, in my mind, to become more of a safety issue, right? Their well-being is, as a parent, it's our responsibility to provide for their health, welfare, and safety. So when they are in a situation where they're feeling threatened or they're in great distress because they're feeling threatened, then it is our responsibility to step in. I don't necessarily think that older teens need to have parents going through their messages all the time. You can extend some amount of privacy based on communication and accountability, because that's how we build trust. But it is a fine line, and I agree that it's difficult, but when you see your child in great distress, that's when you need to step in.
Yeah. So that not just them coming home and saying, I have no friends, everything's awful, but maybe days of it or weeks of it, or it's starting to affect your mental health, I need to step in.
Right. So yes, everyone has a bad day, sometimes even a bad week. It's when it's more kind of pervasive and ongoing, when it's hindering their functioning. Okay, so now they don't want to go to school. Now they're not feeling well, so avoiding school. So now it's getting to a point where there's a bigger problem, and that's when we need to address something with different strategies.
Yeah, I know you're especially worried about kids who could be different, maybe the kids who have tougher times making friends, maybe they have learning differences, or even LGBTQ youth, you say, are much more likely to be bullied?
Yes, I often put those individuals into the category of vulnerable, right? Kids who have underlying vulnerabilities. They have learning disabilities. They have underlying anxiety, depression. They identify, as LGBTQ. They have a significant physical handicap. So anyone that has vulnerabilities in some way I get more concerned about because they are more likely to be bullied. So it's keeping a little closer eye on those children and adolescents who have additional vulnerabilities.
Let's talk about the bystander. Everyone knows when something's bad going on with their kids, and you think, well, why aren't your friends standing up for you? And oftentimes they don't. But you say bystanders really do have an important role. How do you get those kids to stand up against the bully, which would probably work?
So bystanders do play a really important part in mitigating a lot of these negative situations, a lot of these bullying situations. Because if you think about it as a power dynamic, that bully, that individual that is engaging in these behaviors, and let's face it, it happens in school, but it also happens to adults as well in work situations. And there are bystanders there too. But if the bystanders can be empowered to speak up, either in support of the individual being bullied or against the bully, it does a lot to take power away from that bully. So, and even, I just like to talk about these things sometimes with young people, right? Is this a situation that's happening to you? Do you have a friend that can be your ally? Do you know anyone that's aware of this, that could be an ally for you, that's a bystander? So it's trying to empower those individuals who are bystanders or who are allies, because they actually do play a role in either letting the situation continue or stepping in because of their, kind of social place to help put an end to it.
Right. So it's not, you're going to knock off, if the bully's the popular kid with all the social power, you're not going to probably change that. But you're saying giving your kids social skills, learning how to do conflict resolution, and even one friend can make a difference. So this is something that maybe, I know sometimes kids are resistant to listen to what we have to say, but maybe you want to play this interview for them, because the more information they have, they can feel empowered. And that in of itself could probably disrupt the power balance.
Yeah, and I do think there comes a time, based on the level of distress that your child or adolescent is in, there comes a time where you do need to get someone else involved, right? Yep. You do need to get the coach or the school support personnel. You do need to get other people involved. I always, try to encourage adults in positions of authority to just keep an eye on some of these power imbalances. We can do things as parents or coaches, or, we see our child's friend who might be struggling in some way, to sort of speak up and say, here, I'm here to be a resource for you if you need it.
Right. Some great advice. Dr. Laura, thank you so much for sharing it with us, and we hope we can help some of those teens that might be struggling out there.
Take care, Kara.
You too. If you want to find more content, you can look on the Channel 3 app. We have more Kara's Cures episodes there, and you can always follow me on social media at Kara Sundlin.